There are confrontations that go beyond mere debate. They become moments that shift the perspective of an entire room. When Professor Nathaniel Carter stood at the podium with his usual air of confidence, mocking faith as a sign of intellectual weakness, no one expected a young student named Barron Trump to be the one to silence him. In a matter of minutes, the arrogance of reason was met with the calm strength of belief. But this was not just a story of victory or defeat. It was a journey of unraveling biases, where a single simple question left the entire lecture hall holding its breath. What truly requires more faith? From the very first moment, the atmosphere in the lecture hall hung heavy over the students seated there. Professor Nathaniel Carter, with confident eyes and a voice laced with disdain, began his lecture by ridiculing faith. He declared with absolute certainty that believing in God was a mark of intellectual inferiority, claiming that science had explained everything one thought to be divine. To many, the lecture felt like a direct assault on those who held spiritual beliefs close to their hearts. But among the somber faces in the room, one person stood firm. Barron Trump, a young student with calm eyes and a poised demeanor, decided to confront the renowned professor known for his intellectual arrogance. As Barron rose to his feet, facing the curious and skeptical gazes around him, a quiet tension rippled through the room. In a calm yet resolute voice, Barron began to challenge not just the professor's arguments, but also his habit of placing intellect above others. Barron didn't argue that faith should replace science. Instead, he spoke about humble thinking and the acknowledgement that science has yet to explain everything. That gap is part of the journey toward truth, Barron said, and pretending that anything science hasn't explained is stupidity is just another form of blind faith. The first bead of sweat began to form on Professor Carter's forehead as Barron quickly turned the tide. For the first time in his teaching career, Carter started to speak but couldn't find the words. Barron's calmness and sharp reasoning not only left his opponent stunned, but also rendered the entire class silent. The students, who had initially found entertainment in watching others be criticized, gradually shifted to a sense of genuine respect. Everyone in that room realized that what Barron had offered wasn't just a perspective on faith, it was a demonstration of clear, logical, and compelling reasoning. The most important lesson here wasn't just about faith or science. It was about humility and the ability to admit that we don't have all the answers. While Professor Carter stood at the podium with overwhelming confidence, he failed to see that he was embodying the very flaw he was criticizing. And Barron, with his calm words and steady demeanor, left the entire class with a lasting lesson. That true wisdom isn't about proving you know everything. It's about having the courage to admit when you don't. However, the debate didn't end there. After Barron's powerful opening, where he questioned the relationship between intelligence and faith, the tension in the hall only grew stronger. What truly left everyone holding their breath was the shift in Barron's approach. He didn't stop at defending his faith. He turned the tables by posing questions that forced his opponent to reflect on his own beliefs. Barron never resorted to personal attacks. Instead, he delved into the heart of the issue, exposing the one-sidedness in Carter's arguments. This completely changed the dynamics of the debate. When Barron emphasized that the relationship between faith and intelligence was not oppositional, but complementary, he touched on a crucial point that no one had dared to raise in the lecture hall before. His calm and confident demeanor as he questioned the origins of consciousness, life, and the fine-tuning of the universe sparked a wave of introspection among the audience. He didn't claim that what he believed was absolutely true. Rather, he pointed out that blindly dismissing the unknown was its own form of irrational faith. With thoughtful reasoning, Barron gradually shifted the focus from defending his beliefs to questioning the objectivity and consistency of Carter's logic. The questions Barron posed didn't just leave Carter flustered, they awakened a sense of reflection in everyone present. Where does consciousness really come from? Can life truly arise spontaneously from inanimate matter? Why is the universe so perfectly fine-tuned for life to exist? These were questions that stretch beyond the current limits of science. Instead of offering a definitive answer, Barron invited everyone to ponder, helping them realize that faith and intelligence could walk hand in hand on the journey to discover truth. What made Barron's arguments so powerful wasn't just the content, it was the way he delivered them. He didn't use complex jargon or speak with arrogance. On the contrary, his tone was calm, respectful, yet deeply impactful. The contrast between Barron's composure and Carter's growing frustration highlighted the true power of reason and steadfastness. As Carter began to stumble, offering emotional rather than logical rebuttals, the audience slowly realized that his outward confidence was just a fragile facade. One of the most memorable moments came when Barron pointed out the inconsistency in Carter's argument. You claim there is no God, but how can you be so sure of that? This wasn't just a challenge to Carter, it was a reminder to everyone that science, for all its greatness, has its limits. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. In that moment, many in the hall realized that intellectual arrogance could blind us to greater possibilities. Barron didn't simply argue, he opened new horizons of thought. He emphasized that faith isn't the abandonment of reason, it's the acknowledgement that some things lie beyond human understanding. The courage to admit, I don't know, can be the starting point of the greatest discoveries. This humility, powerfully woven into Barron's arguments, earned him not just trust, but the deep respect of the audience. Meanwhile, Carter, who once stood at the podium believing he held the ultimate truth, now seemed weighed down by his own arrogance. He was no longer the symbol of cold intellect. He had become an example of how pride can imprison us within our own biases. The image of Carter gripping the lectern, searching for words but finding none, was a testament to the idea that reason without humility cannot lead to truth. When Barron returned to his seat, the silence in the room lingered for a few seconds before hushed murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. It wasn't the noise of mockery, it was the sound of awe and reflection. The students no longer saw Barron as just a young college student. They saw in him a symbol of confidence, intelligence, and steadfastness. That debate wasn't just a lesson on faith and reason, it was a lesson on humility and respect in discourse. The deeper meaning of this story, with its profound shift in arguments and emotions, stands as proof of the power of an open mind and a steadfast heart. In a world where intelligence is often equated with skepticism, Barron showed that true strength lies in having the courage to believe and to confront the unanswered questions. It was this bravery that made all the difference, turning a debate into a memorable moment. Not just for those present that day, but for everyone on their journey to seek the truth. As the atmosphere in the lecture hall gradually settled, the tension seemed to shift from one person to another. If it was once Professor Carter's confident, somewhat arrogant demeanor being tested, it was now the pensive gaze of the students who had once cheered for him. Barron Trump had not merely stood up to defend his faith, he had done much more. He had compelled everyone to reflect on the nature of knowledge, belief, and the humility required in the pursuit of truth. When Barron finished speaking, the silence that followed was no longer the suffocating tension of confrontation. It was a profound silence filled with awe and reverence. Professor Carter, once seen as the embodiment of reason and logic, now seemed smaller than ever. His hands trembled as he clutched the lectern, his gaze wandering as if searching for a sharp rebuttal that simply wouldn't come. In that fleeting moment, his long-held arrogance was peeled away layer by layer, revealing the fragility of an absolute belief in himself. The students in the hall, who had started as passive spectators, now found themselves witnessing a moment of transformation. They began to realize that in academia, where logic is glorified and emotions are often dismissed, faith still holds a special place. Barron had demonstrated that intelligence does not have to be at odds with faith. On the contrary, the two can coexist, supporting each other in the journey toward truth. The questions raised that day were not just for Professor Carter, they were for everyone present. Is intelligence truly the only tool to understand the world? Or are there things beyond the reach of ordinary logic? With humility and sharp insight, Barron pointed out that dismissing something simply because it cannot yet be explained is a careless act. He placed two forms of belief on the scales: faith in the existence of a higher power and faith in the denial of it. And ironically, it was the second belief that seemed to waver in that moment. After the debate, the atmosphere on campus remained far from normal. Groups of students gathered in cafes, on the grass, and in the library, eagerly discussing what had just transpired. Barron became the main topic of conversation. But interestingly, people didn't just talk about his victory. They spoke of how he had remained calm and respectful even when his faith had been mocked. It was a valuable lesson, not only about intelligence, but also about tolerance. As for Professor Carter, he left the lecture hall in an unusually quiet manner. No one dared approach him, sensing the inner turmoil he was grappling with. For a man who had once prided himself on his ability to persuade others, being challenged so effectively in his own area of expertise was a profound shock. Yet instead of becoming angry or more defensive, he seemed to be reflecting on what had happened. His gaze as he watched Barron walk away from the hall was no longer that of a teacher looking at a student. It was the gaze of a man learning something new. Carter's shift in perspective was a crucial turning point in the story. It showed that even the brightest minds could falter when arrogance clouds their judgment. At the same time, it proved that people are capable of change when they listen and humbly learn from others. Barron didn't just win a debate, he planted a seed of humility and empathy in everyone's heart. In the days that followed, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere at the university. Debates became more open and respectful. Students were no longer afraid to express their beliefs, whether in science or religion. They had learned that in the search for truth, there is no room for arrogance. True intelligence isn't about tearing others down, it's about listening, understanding, and accepting that we may also be wrong. The meaning of the story goes far beyond a single debate in a lecture hall. It serves as a reminder that knowledge and faith are not two opposing worlds, but two essential pieces of the grand puzzle of truth. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is not about who wins or loses. It's about how we face the truth, ourselves, and those with different perspectives. Barron became the main topic of conversation. But interestingly, people didn't just talk about his victory. They spoke of how he had remained calm and respectful even when his faith had been mocked. It was a valuable lesson, not only about intelligence, but also about tolerance. As for Professor Carter, he left the lecture hall in an unusually quiet manner. No one dared approach him, sensing the inner turmoil he was grappling with. For a man who had once prided himself on his ability to persuade others, being challenged so effectively in his own area of expertise was a profound shock. Yet instead of becoming angry or more defensive, he seemed to be reflecting on what had happened. His gaze as he watched Barron walk away from the hall was no longer that of a teacher looking at a student. It was the gaze of a man learning something new. Carter's shift in perspective was a crucial turning point in the story. It showed that even the brightest minds could falter when arrogance clouds their judgment. At the same time, it proved that people are capable of change when they listen and humbly learn from others. Barron didn't just win a debate, he planted a seed of humility and empathy in everyone's heart. In the days that followed, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere at the university. Debates became more open and respectful. Students were no longer afraid to express their beliefs, whether in science or religion. They had learned that in the search for truth, there is no room for arrogance. True intelligence isn't about tearing others down. It's about listening, understanding, and accepting that we may also be wrong. The meaning of the story goes far beyond a single debate in a lecture hall. It serves as a reminder that knowledge and faith are not two opposing worlds, but two essential pieces of the grand puzzle of truth. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is not about who wins or loses. It's about how we face the truth, ourselves, and those with different perspectives. Following the peak of tension in the confrontation between Barron and Professor Carter, the fourth perspective delves deeper into the psychological transformation and unexpected reactions from the audience. The atmosphere in the hall shifted from an intense academic setting to a space filled with emotion and contemplation. Faces that once displayed smugness now turned silent, with eyes attentively following Barron's every word and action in undisguised admiration. This shift was not merely a natural response to an outstanding debate, but also evidence of the power of faith and humility. Barron, with his calm demeanor, showed no arrogance after his victory. Despite having dismantled the solid arguments of an experienced professor, he remained humble and respectful. This contrast left a profound impression on the audience. Many students who once sided with Carter now found themselves questioning their own beliefs. They realized that intelligence does not have to conflict with faith. Instead, the combination of reason and belief can create a stronger stance. In the moments of silence after the debate ended, small groups of students began to discuss. Gone were the mockery and laughter, replaced by seriousness and curiosity. "How could he stay so calm?" one student exclaimed, still gazing at Barron. "He didn't just talk about faith, he embodied it with his whole being." These murmurs quickly spread, not just within the hall but beyond it, becoming the central topic of conversation on campus for days. What was even more remarkable was Professor Carter's reaction. The professor, once a symbol of authority and intellect in the eyes of his students, now stood there, silent and contemplative. His defeat was not merely a matter of being refuted, it was a failure in his approach to the subject. He realized that in his overwhelming confidence, he had overlooked an essential element: humility in perception and respect for differing perspectives. Barron, with his steadfast yet non-confrontational stance, had taught him that lesson. Carter's change in mindset did not happen immediately. It was the result of prolonged reflection after the debate. He sat in the empty lecture hall staring at the notes that once filled him with pride, but now seemed meaningless. In the dim light of the afternoon, he realized that intelligence was not everything. He had used intellect as a weapon to mock others instead of using it to seek the truth. In the following days, the classroom atmosphere changed significantly. Students began to ask more questions, no longer afraid of Carter's reactions. They realized that curiosity and the thirst for knowledge should be nurtured, not suppressed by ridicule. Carter also changed. He listened more, responding with greater respect and thoughtfulness. Once, when a student brought up Barron's argument about the existence of God, instead of immediately countering it, he paused for a moment and then replied, "That is a thought worth considering." Barron, on the other hand, became a symbol of courage and humility in the eyes of his fellow students. He did not seek fame, nor did he appear triumphant. When asked about how he felt after the debate, he simply smiled and said, "It was never about winning or losing. It's about whether we have the courage to stand up for what we believe in." The story of the debate quickly spread beyond the lecture hall, becoming a topic of discussion in the academic community and on social media. Many regarded it as a perfect example of how reason and faith can coexist. Online forums buzzed with analyses of both sides' arguments, but a common thread emerged: the respect for Barron's courage and humility. In the end, what remained memorable was not who won the debate, but how it changed people's perceptions. Students who once mocked religious beliefs now understood that differing viewpoints need not lead to conflict. Professor Carter, once proud of his ability to intellectually overpower others, learned to respect what he did not yet understand. And Barron, with his blend of intellect and faith, proved that true strength lies in humility and courage. That debate was not merely a momentary event. It became a symbol, a reminder that in the pursuit of truth, we need both reason and faith. When these two elements come together, they create a power strong enough to shake even the most steadfast convictions. The final moments of the debate left not only a lasting impression on those present, but also resonated far beyond the confines of the lecture hall. As students left the classroom, they carried with them not just their notebooks, but also profound reflections on the relationship between reason and faith. The story of the confrontation between Barron and Professor Carter quickly spread, becoming a phenomenon in academic circles. It was more than just a debate. It was a powerful reminder that true wisdom is not found in bringing others down, but in the willingness to confront our own limitations.